Oh, the 5:30, August 4th, 2025. This is Rachel Stemich, Chair for the Deschutes County Historic Landmarks Commission. I'd like to bring tonight's meeting to order. We have here Eli Ashley and Mark Hudson. Sorry, I blanked on your last
You were in
name
the
for a
back.
second. Yep.
Yep.
And then I don't, who's online tonight?
No,
Okay.
our presenter.
Okay. All right. Excellent. We'd like to start tonight with any public comments. Don't think we have any though. Is that correct? And then the next item on the agenda for tonight is the approval of the meeting minutes. We actually have 2 months, or I'm sorry, 2 meetings worth. We have February 3rd and May 5th. I think we postponed the last review from our May meeting. So we have two of those. I've reviewed those and approve both meetings. Do we have a second for those?
I'll second the motion. I was not there for the May one,
Right,
so
that's right. Okay. Both the February 3rd and May 5th are approved. And then we have a series of action items tonight. The HLC membership update. I think you're probably gonna fill us in on that, Will.
Yeah, thank you. For the record, Will Groves, Planning Manager, filling in for Tanya Salzman. As HLC is aware, Commissioner Christopher resigned from the HLC earlier this year, and staff posted a recruitment which closed on June 30th. Staff received 1 application and is in the process of convening an interview committee. Once the interview is complete, staff will relay the recommendations to the HLC via email and then, if successful, to the Board of County Commissioners.
great.
And we have an interview set up on Wednesday afternoon for the new commissioner.
Excellent.
Next item that we have is Women's History Multi-Property Documentation Project. I think, is Evan West from the Oregon Heritage still going to be presenting, or was that postponed because of Tanya being out?
Oh, no. So he's online on Zoom and will be presenting.
Excellent.
Go ahead and elevate him now.
Fantastic.
Hey everyone, clicking the right buttons here so you can get to see me hopefully. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So far so good. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I'm going to try not to take too much of your time. I have about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on, hopefully the myriad of questions you all have. I'm happy to be here. Tanya to be here. I'm sorry, Tanya's impatience. I appreciate it. I think so. We don't use Zoom as often as I do Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to try to share the PowerPoint presentation with you all. And I don't know what the best. Here we go. That I think is the best view. Let me see. There we go. Should be sharing with you momentarily. Let me know if you can see PowerPoint on your screen.
Yep, looking good.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Well, excellent. Just gonna jump right in so that we're not wasting anybody's time. Once again, I'm Evan West. I am with Oregon Heritage, the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office. I'm the Survey and Inventory Coordinator. Now, it's a misleading title because we also I have a counterpart who's the Archaeology Survey and Inventory Coordinator. I am the Built Environment Survey and Inventory Coordinator, so everything dealing with buildings, houses, above ground, non-archaeological. And this slide has my contact info so that you can write that down if you don't have it. Tanya and Will, I think, both have a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, so don't worry about scrambling to write down notes right now. They have it and can share it with you at any time. And I do apologize, I kind of can only see one thing at a time, so on the off chance that you have a question, just speak up. Shout at me. I'm gonna move your screen over there, so hopefully I see you. But All right. So, and I apologize for any redundancy. This is a survey format that we try to give every time we talk to anybody, just so we're not assuming knowledge or background. When we talk about survey, it's because survey and inventory we say is the foundation of historic preservation. We can't work with what we aren't aware of, so we try very hard to constantly update our awareness of historic or potentially historic places across Oregon. And it also involves updating information that we've previously gathered. We try to do that as often as possible because things can change rapidly, as I'm sure you know. Now, there's only one of me, so all of this doesn't happen as frequently as I would like it to. We depend in large part on volunteers and user-driven submissions, so that's a big part of what I'm here to ask for your help with tonight. Traditionally, there are two types of surveys. I have my transitions out of order. I apologize. Intensive level survey is actually the second step in surveying. We start usually with the reconnaissance level survey, or what we call RLS. If I say RLS or ILS, that's referring to these two things. And as you can probably imagine, reconnaissance level is very fundamental, is usually external from the public right of way look at a resource. Whereas an intensive level survey, we might try to get in touch with property owners and do deeper background research actually at a property location potentially. An RLS is a first look at a broad group usually, and an intensive can be more detailed. Very important as we're talking about, I'm going to ask you to share information with your community. And so when you say survey, it's very important that we all remember that we're not talking about an engineering survey. This has nothing to do with infrastructure projects at this point in time. Nobody's property is going to be evaluated for boundaries or anything like that. In case anyone is worried, that's not happening. And we get a lot of similar concern. Survey alone does not mean that a location is going to end up on the National Register of Historic Places. Like I said, this is foundational, fundamental, really purely for informational purposes. And we hope that people will always be interested in pursuing additional steps, either local, I don't know if you have a county level. In Oregon, we don't have a state level designation, but whatever next step you might be interested in pursuing, there's probably an option for you. And there are a lot of benefits to placing a property on the National Register of Historic Places. So as you're talking with folks in your community, rest assured, no one's forcing anything, but there are a lot of benefits to finding out information. Specifically, what I've come to talk to you about tonight is what we call a multi-property documentation, which you may or may not be familiar with. Again, I'm assuming zero background knowledge, so I do apologize for any overlap. Uh, what it is really is a cover document or a summary report that documents multiple different types of places that have a unifying theme. You might be familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of a historic district. I think downtown Bend is a historic district, for example. And that is also taking together places that have a unifying theme. But importantly, a multi-property document is not itself a National Register nomination. So an example would be if we were to look very broadly at buildings in the national park that were constructed by either the WPA or the CCC or other works employment programs, that could be the theme for a multiple property evaluation across multiple areas. Now that would be huge and unwieldy. I wouldn't want to do a project of that scope myself, but just to give you an example. And like I said, very important, once again, this is not a nomination on its own. It might prepare us to nominate properties, add properties to the historic register, but this is still a step below that. So Oregon Heritage has partnered with a consulting company, a really great group of consultants who absolutely know what they're doing when it comes to historic research and National Register nomination, etc., to create what we're calling an Oregon Women's Labor History multi-property documentation. That's a little wordy, but it was all wording chosen with specificity and reason. So the context from our project scope says this project should address specifically the paid, typically outside of the home labor of women in Oregon, in case that goes without saying, doesn't go without saying. And it should cover the range of women's labor through time, including domestic work, teaching, sex work, healthcare, wartime, industrial work, and childcare outside of the home, as well as the expansion of jobs open to women. So pretty much everything, the exclusion being for this purpose, we're saying that basically stay-at-home childcare is not covered. And very importantly, I want to make clear, we're not saying that that is not critical labor. We're just saying that that's not covered by the scope of this project. So What I'm here really to ask is for your help sharing information. We're looking for potential sites, properties, locations, what we call resources related to women's labor history, as I just showed you on that last slide, in central, eastern, really all of Oregon, but since I'm talking to you folks in Deschutes County, central to spreading into the eastern part of Oregon is uh, just an area that we're trying to fill in more. So we're looking for previously known, as we talked about, we update inventory sometimes, a lot of time, whenever we can, or even nominated registered National Register locations, which may not have been so because of their relation to women's history, or they may have been. And we're also looking for anything previously unidentified, anything that has not been surveyed, not been given the proper credit and evaluation yet. And since you all know Deschutes County better than I do, we're looking for those of you who have connections to family, friends, public or private property, anything that you think you might be aware of, and we want you to share this with whoever you might come in contact with. Anything that someone might know, we depend in part on the people who know sharing the info with us. All suggestions are welcome, even if it doesn't end up in the project ultimately. The more information we gather, just the better everyone is. We can always add them to other projects. We can always reach out individually, not related to this project. Spreading information is really one of the best things you can do for us, and I appreciate your help in that regard. So, there are a number of different ways you can do this. Number one, before we even talk about makeoregonhistory.org, I will say, once you have my info from the first slide of this PowerPoint, my email, my phone number, the easiest way is always just to email me or call me. One of the best parts of my job is getting to talk to people about diverse places across the state, whatever the question may be. So please don't ever hesitate to let people know that they can just call me up or shoot me an email and say, hey, I heard you were looking for something, or I might have something, or I have a question about this place. Really, I love hearing from people across our great state, so don't ever hesitate there. There is, and I do want to make clear for this purpose, a lot of the info will be passed along to our consultants so they can decide whether or not it's fitting in the context of the project. But it's really easy to send that to me and I will send it along so that you're not juggling multiple contact information. There is another way. If you visit our Oregon Heritage webpage, and click on the tab that says something like Submit Property Information, it will take you to a different web page that you can also access directly that's called makeoregonhistory.org. This is a little bit older. It was created a few years ago, so the technology does look dated. I promise you it's fully functional. You'll get to a landing page that has this message, and when you click on Share Info, it will take you to another set of submission pages, and about 3 clicks in from the first part where you list a location and name and talk a little bit about what that property is like, you'll get to a tab here that says history, and it gives you an opportunity to write in information that hasn't been asked previously. And this is a good place for you to say, this is related to what Evan was asking for about the Women's History MPD or Women's History Project. I chose this tab specifically so that it highlights there is a spot. It's 3 slides in, so you have to be patient, but there is a spot for you to say why you're submitting something. And there's no wrong answer. It can be, this is related to this project. It can be, I just thought my house is fascinating and I wanted to know if you also thought my house is fascinating. Or I have a question about the National Register. I have a question about making a survey happen, whatever the case may be. There's no wrong information. The only thing that we try to avoid, unfortunately, this portal doesn't have any safeguards against submitting a blank document. So just try to remember to type something in when you get here. All right, that's a whirlwind. I've thrown a lot in there. Let me pause and ask what questions you have. That's actually the end of my slides, so we can have a free form discussion now.
Evan,
What
you basically you're taking input and vetting its eligibility or legitimacy, I guess, first and foremost, before going too far into it, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. You're essentially correct. So the purpose of this project is eventually we'll create a multi-property documentation cover letter talking about a variety of properties across the state of Oregon. I can't remember exactly how many they are looking for, but it's somewhere between 5 and 15, I think, across the whole state, connecting themes in women's labor history. And what we can do from there is explore nominating individual properties to the National Register of Historic Places if property owners are interested in that, or if they're public places. We can also encourage local action if there's eligible local action. And it will also just promote awareness because it will ultimately live on our historic sites database, and properties will be identified as having been included in this multi-property documentation at one point in time. So yes, anything that might be related to that broad category, our consultant has asked us to open up to the public. Do you have something that you think is related? And we're trying really hard not to put boundaries on that, because if you think a schoolhouse, or a school that's not maybe a schoolhouse but was an early constructed school, could be related to education and women in teaching, or was a women's school, or everything from that to uh, say that somebody had a family business that was started by their grandmother, and it's been around for 100 years now. Regardless of what type of business that is, we want to hear about it, because I can get out and drive across the state and take a look at every building I see, and I try to, but I still won't know necessarily whether it has a background that's not visible from the surface. So you're right. That's what we're hoping for, is for people to submit information, and our consultant will take a look at all of it, and they'll make the decision ultimately on whether it relates to the theme that they're trying to connect to, uh, and whether they want to pursue additional survey at that location. And at some point, then somebody might be contacted to let them know someone's going to take a picture of your house from the sidewalk. You don't have to do anything, but we're just letting you know. Or we think your house is a prime candidate for the National Register. We'd love to do an intensive level survey of it. Would you be interested in showing us more beyond the sidewalk? So it's never going to be a surprise once someone submits information to us, but you're exactly right in your summary.
Evan, few questions. First is, you're looking for both built and non-built sites?
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to say yes. Just again, out of an interest in capturing as much information as possible. I can't guarantee that they'll have equal interest either way, but in the end, in terms of what the consultant chooses to work with, but in front of submissions, yes.
And then the second question that came to mind is, understanding this isn't necessarily for a registry site or a resource site, but are we still thinking about the same timelines in terms of historic, or could this still be something, if it was a big deal, relatively recent in the context of registry timelines?
Yeah, absolutely. Another excellent question. So, correct. For anyone curious who might be watching online, typically with historic properties, what we call eligible historic properties, we look for something that's at least 50 years old. And we start there, assuming that there will also be some time that it takes for a nomination to happen. And so it'll be even older than that, probably by the time the process is completed. But that being said, it's also important to remember that old is not necessarily historic, and new is not necessarily non-historic, and beautiful is not necessarily historic, and something that looks, in your opinion, ugly is also not necessarily non-historic. Um, so absolutely, if you think you have something related to this context, it's the theme, really, women's labor history, that we're more interested in, rather than a concern at this time that it's exactly age eligible or a prime uh, candidate under any one of the built environment criteria. We're looking more for connection to the context right now. And if there's something that was recent history that can meet the exception for recent history, I love to see that happen, because it's fairly rare, but can be really, really important and overlooked. So don't hesitate. Absolutely. What else?
Um,
Let me
I'm
go back
thinking,
to the context slides. You can.
oh yeah.
have a chance to see, there we go, what the categorization is again.
When I think of women's labor, I'm thinking also there's going to be more events, not just places, but actual, happenings that have occurred in Oregon that would be included. So that's eligible, right? It's not necessarily just a location,
Yeah,
but like a special
absolutely.
tour.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I like to say that pretty much when we talk about historic preservation, pretty much everything comes with a gigantic asterisk. There can be a lot of leeway in a lot of situations. And it is absolutely the case that a location associated with a single event or the creation of a single event or a movement, um, that association can give that location significance. Um,
Mhm.
um, Events and movements can be interesting because it can be both harder to track their movement and places they've been over time, but also it can open up a lot of different possibilities across different communities in different parts of Oregon if it's a movement that started somewhere and spread to other locations. Um, so you're absolutely correct. Again, in my perspective, it's a lot better to not worry about limiting yourself, at least at this stage, what you're interested in submitting potentially, because the more knowledge, the more potential avenues we have for exploration, the better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, I have some ideas of possible submittals, but how much documentation or how much information would you like to have in order to, you know, I guess, accurately look at a concept or something that's presented? What do you need?
That's a great question. I think if you have, ideas, but you don't have the documentation yourself, for example, I know that the Elks Lodge in downtown Sisters, I don't know if that such a thing exists, but just an example, was the meeting site of the first uh oh, sorry, I'm just blanking on the term I was going to use, was the meeting site of the first women's voting group in Deschutes County. Yeah, an example like that. But I don't
Okay.
know what proves that or who to contact about that. If all you say is that, um, someone will have enough information to follow up on trying to find evidence to point to that.
Okay. Sort of,
It's
yeah.
really critical that we have a name of a location. If you know a specific either building name, city name, the more location information you can provide, the better. If you have contact information for somebody at that location, um, that can be really, really helpful because if we need to get in touch to ask if we can take a look at the current character of their building, it can take a lot of time to try to track down if you don't know, but you don't always know, so that's okay. Um, so basically, concepts and locations that you might be related to, but don't have the full evidence yourself are absolutely acceptable. Just try to be clear as possible about what specific location you're talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish we
What's
had a nice poster that you could print out on
duration
the same
of,
subject, but
Evan, what's the duration for the MPD process look like?
that's a great question. It will run into the next calendar year. Um, they're hoping to gather information and plan reconnaissance level survey happening probably into spring of 2026. And then I think they have a time frame for identifying, based on that, a fewer selection of intensive level surveys. And then from there, making a recommendation for candidates for National Register nomination and finalizing the multi-property cover letter, which will wrap up, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, about November 2026. Um, I think it's about a year from now that we're hoping to have the process completed. So you have a little bit of time to gather ideas and submit things before someone will actually be on the ground doing survey. Um, just as long as you don't forget, you can take a little bit of time.
Is one of the other processes you have with these reaching out to historical societies in various regions?
Yes, I do believe so. We just created a letter to send out to community partners, and I don't know with certainty who has the list of which partners those are exactly, and which, including historical societies. So, and I think it's a good question because there can be a lot of big and small organizations that sort of have the title historical society or of some kind. So if you think that there are some that are in your community anywhere that we should not forget about, that can be another thing that you can submit is, for example, Cottage Grove has the Cottage Grove Museum and a aviation museum, and they also have a local genealogical society. And someone who didn't know that might assume that the organization that has the title of museum is the agency to get in touch with. Um, so if there's some that you have in mind, please don't assume that we know, because I bet Curry Gill does, who is our grants and outreach coordinator, who is really heading this project. But it's not a guarantee that our consultants knows, and I'm certain that they'll want to get in touch with more if possible.
Great. I have some ideas.
And you feel free to shout them out, or more importantly, please email me or submit them on that website portal. I can take down notes right now, but it will be more effective if you actually send them over. Great.
Will do.
Well, thank you. And like I said, and please do share the information. And if you have anything that you discover that you need in order to share the information effectively, we probably have some tools we can provide to help you, including I think we have a form letter for our historical societies and other community partners. So if you'd like to be part in sharing that, I can find out if that's possible.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the makeoregonhistory.org, that's the place to head to for that.
Absolutely, that's a safe location to submit information. And second to that, email me directly. Feel free to spread my information. If I was there in person, I would give you a large stack of business cards. If you want business cards, I can make sure that some get mailed to you. Well, I don't
Excellent.
want to take all of your time. That certainly covers my allotted time, and I apologize for the whirlwind of information there, but it sounds like you got it because you asked great questions, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Evan.
Yep.
Thank you so
Thank
much. I'll stop sharing my screen and let you get on if I can figure out how to do that.
All right. So on to our next topic is a update for the Goal 5 cultural areas rulemaking. And well, I know there's a little bit of updates from the DLCD side of things. Sounds like.
Thank you. So on December 5th, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, LCDC, held its deliberation session and consideration of adoption of the rulemaking for Goal 5 cultural areas following the public hearing that was held in September. LCDC ultimately voted to adopt the proposed rules effective January 1, 2026, and staff provided an overview of these rules at the February HLC meeting. However, since that time, DLCD's staff have identified several discrete refinements to recommend to the Land Conservation and Development Commission to consider. These pertain to who can bring an application for it to amend a comprehensive plan to place a culturally significant landscape feature on a local inventory, and how local governments should process this type of application, if it should be legislative or quasi-judicial. A third area of clarification pertains to the metro urban growth boundary expansion process, which isn't relevant to Deschutes County. So let's talk a little bit about legislative versus quasi-judicial. Not all governments have a process for accepting applications for legislative amendments. We do. And there was concern expressed at the time for that legislative amendments could take, how long they might take, because they don't have time clocks associated with those local government reviews. With regard to who can submit applications, the current language allows applications to be brought by federally recognized tribes in Oregon and other culturally identified groups. The rulemaking committee heard from a representative from the Spruce tribe, and LCDC received comments from the Cowlitz tribe, who would like to be recognized in this role. From the meeting notes, and quoting, RAC members expressed preference for limiting the opportunity to bring amendments directly to federally recognized tribes in Oregon. They said this would reduce opportunity for non-tribal, culturally identified groups and reduce the possibility of local protections allowing for access to private property. Interesting quote there. The current status, rulemaking has been reopened, and the Rules Advisory Committee, the RAC, met in May, June, and July. And we don't have notes for the July meeting yet. The committee's final meeting will be after the LCDC hearing at their meeting September 25th and 26th, and before the close of public comment on October 5th. Staff are recommended the effective date, RAC staff are recommending an effective date of the rule for June 30, 2026, to give local governments time to adopt procedures for notifying tribes that are consistent with the rule. Originally, the rules were to become effective January 1st, 2026. This means that any county legislative process to adopt new code pertaining to the rulemaking will be delayed to reflect this timing change. And apologize for reading the memo there verbatim. I'm filling in for Tanya again. My extent of my knowledge on this topic is pretty much limited to what I just read out loud. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to follow up on, I can take notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the other culturally identified groups, I think I had understood that in my own tracking of the matter to be the unrecognized tribal entities, but I am curious as to whether or not there would be other culturally identified groups outside of unrecognized tribes that might be included in that definition and might be relevant to Deschutes County. I had heard discussion, for example, there was some groups representing some of the eras of some of the coolies, for example, from the coolie labor camps and that kind of stuff that had been talked about at different times during the process, but I wasn't sure if that was brought in. It might be relevant to us here. And then my other question is, have any of the tribes reached out? And indicated they might be nominating things, kind of thing.
You're all suffering right now because I took both band and jazz band in high school and did not take typing. All right, got it.
Were there any other deadlines on the schedule at this point, or is this is kind of the final edits for the rulemaking, isn't it? Like, I knew there was a list on the last our last meeting, but I think we're through the finer work details. But I didn't know if there was any others as far as making everything formal at this point. But maybe Tanya probably has like what the formal dates are, if there was any remaining.
Yeah, if there's something beyond the memo, I'll with you.
Okay.
My understanding is that their intent was for this to be final, but
That's, yeah.
intent and reality
Yeah,
was
exactly.
sometimes non-intersectional.
Right.
No, that's a great update, Will. Thank you. And like I said, I think it's just a tracking, with the rules not becoming enforced until next year. My expectation is if we are to hear anything, we probably won't hear about it until next year.
My anticipation as well.
We also, tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the subcommittee roundup. And as we go through the 4 topics, I'm realizing that we haven't, I know, Mark, you and I haven't chatted too much about the subcommittees, but there is the 4 that we have topics for. It was just cultural resource work, wildfire and preservation issues, Camp Abbott, and then general public awareness issues in education. So the first one, the cultural resource work, I know we haven't really chatted
No, we
at
kind of
all.
talked about it, but
Yeah.
I think we initially largely thought that that might have to do with that rulemaking process.
Mhm.
Which it sounds like it'll be delayed until we have any
Mhm.
roles, unless we want to do direct outreach.
Right.
So,
I mean, I'd suggest maybe before, assuming that we do another update before our November meeting, maybe we just
Yep.
get together a little bit, see where, just a revisit of it, honestly,
Yep.
to see now that it's more refined, we can actually have, I think, a better understanding of what our next steps might be, at least for that topic.
Yep.
And then wildfire and preservation issues was Eli and Lily that were discussing that. I don't know if you had a chance to chat with her at all.
No, I haven't seen her actually. in a
Yeah, it's
while.
been a while.
I know. I can reach out to her though.
Okay.
But, pertaining to the issue of fire safety, of course, there's been a lot of activity at the state level with the state
Mhm.
fire map being
That's right.
withdrawn and more information placed on individual properties and owners.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Will, does that somehow affect properties that might be under our jurisdiction or historic? Did the county adopt any specific standards for properties like the city has? City of Bend has adopted like a 5-foot rule, isn't it,
Mm.
around each home?
I'm not familiar with the City of Bend's activities, but I was filling in for another of my planners on this topic, so I actually know this one pretty well.
Oh, great.
So, of course, Deschutes County was engaged starting in through 2019 through 2021 in a local wildfire mapping inventory, and it was determined that the entire county was a wildfire hazard area.
Yep.
Right.
And we got as far as prohibiting shake roofs
Mhm.
countywide, and we were looking to do something more. There's a set of building code regulations called R327 that pertains to new structures and has to do with some things that harden them against particularly ember storms. And we in 2021 in the what looked like was going to be a state effort and what turned out to be the wildfire hazard mapping and risk mapping, we stood down during that period. And at the end of that, and in this current legislative session, though that effort was abandoned, the maps are withdrawn. And in the aftermath of that, local jurisdictions are going to be invited to, if they want to consider applying local criteria to structures.
Hmm.
And what seems, although this is going to be a public process and not to get ahead of that,
Mhm.
it seems like what is most likely on people's minds is something like the City of Sisters of requiring R327 for new construction, particularly related to dwellings. In addition, there's a understanding that the state fire marshal is going to work for model code for defensible space,
Mhm.
following up on that. And so we're also waiting for that information. So I think of these things, of course, R327 applies to new structures. And to the extent that a historic structure was going through significant remodeling that would, or maybe complete reconstruction that would necessitate R327, there might be some interface there. In addition, I think the real important interface is going to be that defensible space.
Mhm.
Once we have a model code, to the extent we might want to expend some of our limited resources on reaching out to flammable historic resources and letting them know that what will likely be a voluntary code or model code or would be helpful for them to undertake, and maybe ultimately trying to identify some resources to help them with that work.
And I think Eli too, the other thing that might be beneficial to discuss is the SWCD and getting their millage approved in the last election. I believe a portion of that funding was supposed to be going towards wildfire resilience and property. So it could be that there are resources for people as well in terms of doing that work.
Okay.
So it might be a good connection to make cross-governmentally.
Hi, I don't know if you guys can hear me. The voice in the sky.
Oh, hi, Lily.
Hi, sorry. I've been kind of a silent watcher for the past 2 meetings. I've been with my dad in LeGrand right now. So, Eli, we should connect on the defensible space stuff. I think that could be a huge resource for those historic properties in town. And we've talked about it before. And I remember, oh, what is her name? The sisters planner who gave us the lovely presentation.
Oh, Emmy Shoup.
Emmy.
Mhm.
Yes, she had some great details in that presentation about the defensible space, as I recall. So maybe we could connect on something to do with that. But I think that would be really interesting and good to do.
That sounds good. I'm glad you're here, there, wherever you are. Very good.
One thing you might want to consider as well during those discussions with having non-flammable materials that are also still have either some sort of historic integrity or have a reproduction of some sort of historic quality to them is just, as an architect, I have a pretty decent background as far as what type of products still reflect the history of cladding or roofing or windows or whatever it might be as a protective surface. So I don't know how that's written into development codes usually, but there are some reproduction materials now out there that are pretty well pretty hardy as far as resiliency for wildfire.
It's good to know.
So usually you see that kind of stuff in the building code, though, not necessarily development codes. But
And similarly, I'd spend all day on wildfire resilient properties. So
oh yeah,
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 happy to discuss on the fuels and load management.
Great.
sure,
Great.
Thanks, Mark.
cool. The next subcommittee is the Camp Abbott, and it looks like Mark, you're solo on that one
Yeah,
at the
and I was
moment.
really on there to support Commissioner Christopher. So I have not talked to myself significantly about
Nope.
that one since they vacated the position. And honestly, I would say they were the primary motivator behind that issue.
Mhm.
I think maybe I could be more facilitative on things like wildfire and those kinds of
Probably.
things. So
Mhm.
it might be beneficial to roll that one up unless there's an
Mhm.
interest group that would like for me to work on it, in which case
Yeah.
I'm minded.
Okay. I'm wondering if this one is one that we revisit after our new commissioner is in place, potentially.
It'd be worthwhile to see if that's
Yeah.
something you'd like to join in on.
Mhm. And then the last one is general public awareness issues, education, and preservation month, which I'm trying to remember. We did have, our last meeting was the May meeting, so we hadn't, is that right? May or June? Did we have 2 meetings?
We had May meeting.
We did have a May meeting. So I'm realizing that we never really did a follow-up on how well Preservation Month went. And Eli, I think you were at the kickoff downtown. Myself and one of the members from the Deschutes Historic Museum were up at the COCC celebration, which went really well. It was interesting actually reaching out to kind of a different flavor of individuals there than what you would see, through general foot traffic that we have in downtown. So that was interesting having our outreach in 2 different locations. I think we actually covered a fair amount of ground that way by having multiple locations. But some really genuine interest. So that was really enjoyable.
We swung by with our 10-year-old, which I was happy to say there was some good interactive stuff for that age class
Mhm.
because it can be terrible bringing a 10-year-old to historic
Yeah.
to historic events kind of
Yep.
thing sometimes. So
I think all you have to
It's
say is
good.
scavenger hunt and prizes, and
Yeah, oh yeah.
usually that piques all other interests. So, and then there was a number of tours, and I feel like it's with that month, that's the interactivity that we have with different events, hands-on type things. I wish I knew more with how well some of the Redmond events actually turned out. They I think part of the volunteer group didn't do a really good job of follow-up after the month recap. We should have done something like that. If I can gather up some time, I might send out an email to our core volunteer group and just get a little bit more input on that. I just feel like we kind of, the month was over. And it's like, yeah. But of the events that I attended, I think they were all really, really good. Public outreach and information and education. Of course, that's always the highlight is May. Of course, Deschutes Historic Museum and Three Sisters Historic Society do different presentations and topics throughout the rest of the year. So it's not like it's just that 1 month, but yeah. So far though, that's is my understanding is with the exception of those types of societies and museums, that's kind of what occurs in the county for the rest of the year. So, but yeah, I don't know. Is there any other awareness issues or items that you wanted to mention? So,
I don't know if it's an awareness issue, but Will, do you remember what the timeline is on the grant submission?
Oh, that's a good question. We must be midway in the cycle because
I think
Yeah.
we are.
about half of our meetings are talking about the grant cycle and we must be
Okay.
right in the middle of it.
Mhm.
I don't know if, to what extent that's going to be funded. We had earmarked a lot of those dollars for attending the state conference.
Right.
Mhm. That's right.
Availability of those funds.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll flag Tanya. She'll be watching this. Hi, Tanya.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of what funds are impacted these days, so appreciate it.
Mhm. Yeah. I know the Heritage Month, the stuff that's next year. I think it's in April. So yeah, kind of have that loosely marked on my calendar already. So yeah. Great. I will try to reach out to our volunteer group and get a little bit of feedback. I realized that we didn't do any sort of like recap like we have in years past. So yeah, we'll get a little bit more of a report, maybe share that in November for everyone. All right. So that's it for our subcommittee discussion. And I don't know if there was any other staff or commissioner comments.
I could give you a kind of a quick update. We of course brought to you our annual work plan back at your previous meeting, and we revisit the board periodically to see what they might be interested in as we have additional resources. And of the projects that were reviewed, there was an interest, just as we talked about the board starting to explore a return to this R327 question, a public process to see what, if any, sort of mapping or requirements we might want to consider locally. There's also an interest in a redirection. We do community plans. So most recently we did a Tumalo community plan, and we were scheduled to return to Newberry Country, our South County plan. And the board directed us instead to prioritize slightly the Terrebonne community plan. The Terrebonne Sanitary District is still targeting an opening day in 2028. And they have allocations. It looks like they have enough dollars to generally achieve up to 800 additional residential units in Terrebonne. And the development there is significantly constrained due to septic limitations in that community. And the existing zoning code and comprehensive planning have really been predicated on that septic limitation. And so you can imagine how that might change the community if there's 800 units available. Things like, more restaurants, hotels in association with Smith Rock, those things start to make sense, as well as individual property development at much higher density. And so we're looking forward to bringing to the Planning Commission, date to be determined, a Terrebonne panel. We'll get ODOT, hopefully get ODOT, the sanitary district, the water district, some other Terrebonne luminaries to come and give a kind of a kickoff to that process, and we'll begin a community outreach. These things tend to go from 12 to 24 months, depending on the the intensity of the community engagement and generally find themselves pretty strongly divided between the people who are happy the way it is and the people who've suddenly found that they have a more developable property than they thought.
Mm.
So looking forward to a vigorous process.
Good luck.
Yeah, and maybe for your consideration, if there's anything that you become aware of in Terrebonne that is historic, this might be a moment where things are getting knocked down and built
Mm.
back up. And so I don't know if there's anything in that community that we're not tracking that maybe should have more attention during this time of increased development opportunity.
Mhm. Sometimes it's worth a revisit of the Goal 5 list, or inventory that we have, and then using that almost as a starting point, and then determining other, it's almost like a memory jog of other places that are nearby,
I know we've held meetings in the Grange, and that looks like it
right?
was older than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's what my first thought was also too. I'm sure some sites of a historic nature will come up through Will's vigorous process there, and that I think maybe we should hold some space for it in the conversational context, probably not just existing resource sites, but probably ones that are eligible.
Mhm.
Seem to always come out of those processes. People become aware during that at that point in time. So
Great.
Nothing else from me. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Will. Eva?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. I think we're in good shape. Wonderful. It is 6:21 and we'd like to adjourn tonight's meeting for the August 4th meeting. Thank you.